Record. Hey guys, we're back. We're back to the scaling session of Build, Scale, Done. And let's just do our shot one more time. Build, Scale, Done. All right. Oh, you're going to be done soon. Yes, it's awesome. We're getting close, man. Thanks, guys, for participating. I love it. Okay, so let's get in here. We wanted to talk about scaling budgets. Okay, so that is the core question here is, how can I spend more money on Facebook? Well, that's super easy, right? Super easy, just ramp up your budgets. Don't worry about whether or not it converts. No, we are worried about that. We always want to have the tail end of that question be, how can I spend more money and still have an awesome ROI or ROAS? Anybody know what ROAS stands for? People say something, wash. Okay, it stands for ROAS, return on ad spend. Return on ad spend, all right? ROAS, okay. So return on ad spend is a really important criteria, and it's also really a cool metric that has been added to Facebook reports a little bit recently. And I use it all the time now because it's really a good metric. It's essentially a better metric than looking at your cost per purchase, because once you get a little bit more mature in this Facebook advertisement game, you'll notice that it does matter what your cost per purchase is, but it also matters on how large your purchase is. And ROAS kind of covers that and captures that all in one metric. So the question really to refine it is, how can I double my ad spend, or how can I go at it with 10 times my ad spend? And a lot of times, I mean, and on every stage, this is a really helpful question. In every stage, it's a helpful question to ask yourself, how can I double my ad spend, or how can I get my ad spend from where it is right now to be 10 times of what it is? So bigger thinking, 10x thinking to put your mindset into a different category. I mean, I totally remember when I thought that, man, you know, spending $100 a month on Facebook, that's a lot of ad spend. That's a lot of money to spend, right? And like, I started thinking, man, there's something here that must be working when I was running ads to t-shirt designs on Teespring. And I was going like, oh man, you know, $50 a day, like $100 a day, $200 a day. And you go, whoa, that's a lot of ad spend. Yep. You start talking to your friends, you go, I spend $200 a day on Facebook. It's like, what? You do what?
Yeah.
I mean, $200 a day, that's like $6,000 a month.
Yeah.
If you keep up with that. Yeah. Well, yeah, but then, you know, the cool thing is it has to be that it has a good return. And yeah, so that's what it is. But it helps with your mindset if you always ask yourself this question. When I was running my Pi Day campaign on Teespring, that's essentially what I asked myself. Once I saw that I had a winner, I put my mind to it this way. What do I need to do? What are the exact actions that I need to take to double the ad spend on this tomorrow, by tomorrow? I wanted to, you know, do, okay, well, I know that this, you know, this thing, when you double something every day, you're going to run into really, really, really big numbers.
Yeah,
over just a few days, right? So it really helps. So 2 times is actually big enough as long as you double it frequently enough, right, and soon enough. So you don't even necessarily have to go, okay, you know, I want to spend 10 times. It's actually more helpful to figure out how you spend twice as much and then just repeat that a few times. You're actually going to end up spending, you know, 16 times after just the 3rd repetition. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's guide with these questions, and let's talk about raising budgets. There are basically 2 ways to raise budgets. One is kind of like the tried and true method, which is slow. So the slow method of raising budget entails that you raise the budget 20 to 30% at a time. The idea with that is to not stir up the Facebook algorithm too much. Don't, like, you know, mess it up too much, so that so in theory, so how this works, right? With when you put up any kind of budget, Facebook has to figure out, well, so how large is the audience, and how many people in the audience roughly are going to have to see this thing to spend the amount of budget that you've allocated for it. And then they start to figure, okay, so with that, basically, I need to find people who are likely to convert. So what is it that they're looking for? Okay, video views. So let's go over here in this pool of people who watch a lot of videos. Now they're overlapping with this interest that you put in there. Now, how many people are in this subset of your target audience? Okay, Facebook goes, all right, it's 2 million in the audience. Well, there are, 400,000 people in here. Let's see who's going to show up, right? And let's see how many scrolling actions and stuff they're doing. So by the time you know all that, you have some work to do. And now Facebook is starting to optimize and kind of targeting, honing in on that audience that has been identified this way that I kind of just described. Okay, so now if you change your budget, you kind of jerk this all up, right? You shake that machine. So now Facebook has just kind of isolated, like it has created a little oil bubble out of the buyers that are specifically defined by these criteria within that larger audience that you've even set up in the ad set. And now, so Facebook has isolated this little oil bubble and kind of looking at, okay, so when are they going to show up? And when you throw in more budget, you kind of stir this all back up, because now you go, okay, well, now they want to spend more. They're not really raising the audiences up. So now I have to kind of redo this whole thing. Right now I have to find a larger pool because I want to spend more and figure out how we're going to do this. And so that essentially is messed up every time you do an action. So literally what Facebook says, and they're not wrong with that. They're not at all entirely wrong with that. What Facebook says is, do not touch a campaign, do not touch an ad set once you've set it up. They actually sometimes recommend that you should use lifetime budget so that this is even more solid and more defined within this Facebook calculation of how many people are going to have to see this at this budget and with this kind of result that we can get there. So that's going to be the safest way to get a solid performance if you tell Facebook exactly how much you want to spend on this. Because that's essentially what you do, right? When you put an end to the campaign, you're not just saying, well, just send me something, I'll tell you when it starts getting too bad, right? But you say, okay, I have $1,000 to spend here. I'm going to spend this over the course of 4 weeks. And so that means, 1,000 divided by 30, blah, blah, blah. So all of a sudden, you have something where Facebook can actually make some pretty solid calculations and then figure out how fast they need to display that to kind of reach everybody who could be reached but with this budget and so forth. So therefore, whether or not you raise the budget slow or fast really doesn't make all that much difference. The theory behind raising budgets slowly is, okay, since this all gets stirred up, let's maybe see if we stir it up only just like a little bit. If we shake this water bucket only a little bit, maybe most of the oil bubble will stay together and it won't be so bad. But most of the time, I mean, a lot of times it works this way, but sometimes it also doesn't work, right? So the primary recommendation on Facebook is don't touch the budget. The secondary idea is raise the budget slowly. So you go, okay, so the campaign had some sales, and this ad set over here had 4 sales or 5 sales yesterday. So let me raise it now by 20%. So if you have it already at $10 now, the next day you're going to set it to $12. Now, me personally, I'm too impatient for that. I can't wait for that. Particularly not at $10, right? I'm even too impatient to start with a $10 budget in the first place. But that's a different story for another day. So I like to, but then again, with $1,000 budget, if you have that, if you are at that scaling level, and now you're raising 20%, you're only at $1,200. So that's not really that much more. But anyway, that's the theory behind that. And then the other method is fast scaling. So that method is basically saying, all right, if you're telling me that you have a winning campaign, and this is really a good product that will sell to a bunch of people who are interested in this, then I should be able to double the budget or raise it up to 4 times or even possibly more than that and still come up with good enough results. Okay, so that's the fast method to scale up faster.
2 to 4 times.
2 times to 4 times. Another method of how you can answer that question, how can I double my ad spend, is by duplicating ad sets, right? So duplicating ad sets immediately, instantaneously gets you to double the ad spend tomorrow. Now, if I duplicate the ad set, I'm going to duplicate the ad set always into a new campaign. And that kind of led me to developing this growing new trees business, right? This growing new trees concept of scaling and testing, where testing and scaling is kind of married together in a sense. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get you a compromise of A, listening to Facebook, of not touching the campaign, B, duplicating the ad set, but raising the budgets at the same time. So not raising the budgets, but duplicating ad sets. But if I duplicate the ad set into a new campaign, I might as well just set up a new campaign, CASA 6.2, because then I have more leverage, right? Then I set up more all at the same time. And I can grow faster this way, even without, overstretching. So those are the scaling methods that are available to you. At different times, they can all work. So basically, let's go kind of back. If you do want to raise budgets, if you have a really big fat hit winner, it's going to work fine to raise the budget fast. If you have a mediocre winner, you might get lucky being able to raise the budget slowly, or you might kill it by raising the budget slowly. Okay, duplicating the ad set. There was a question earlier, does this inherit the performance of the previous ad set? And the answer is no, it doesn't, because each ad set is by itself. Yeah. Okay, so therefore you might as well then look at this kind of like as a tree farm, and as you're breeding this, you're setting up a whole new tree, a whole new CASA 6.2, because then you have launched a whole bunch of leverage at the same time. You can duplicate things faster that way. You could also, of course, do things like selectively grow new trees, right? So take some information of what has worked and what hasn't worked, and then create a growing tree with slightly different setups. You change the product, you test the winner against the second product, or you test the creative against another creative. These types of things are what you can try there to scale more. Okay, let's go on. So about budgets and bids, there's of course AutoBid, and let's just talk about kind of what I consider budget and bid ranges. So AutoBid, this is a low budget I consider between $5 and $25. I consider a medium budget between $25 and $100, and a large budget between $100 and $1,000. So, and these numbers, are a little bit adjusted to what you might feel. I'd encourage you to make these up yourself as you go, and just kind of be aware where your comfort levels are. Okay, to identify for you a low budget level. This is per ad set, per ad set and per day. Low budget is identify for yourself what you consider a low budget, and it will have something to do with your comfort level of how much total budget you have available. It will depend on how quickly you want to spend that and how thoroughly you want to test things, right? So, but that is just, those are the ranges, right? And if your range is different, if you consider $100 a day on one ad set a really high budget, then that's going to be your large budget, right? And you kind of have to stretch your mind and stretch your experience to kind of catch up with these thresholds there, which is perfectly fine. I mean, you can't just overcome your conscience by saying to yourself, Thomas said, I shouldn't think of $100 as a large budget. And, this is fluctuating and this is personal. So, take it as what that is. So we already talked really big about this optimization window, 7-day click, 1-day view. This is what I usually use for AutoBid. And then for manual bid, if you want to get into manual bid, I typically use larger budgets, 500 to 15,000. So that's just to say that sky's the limit. If you have something that's working, if you have something that's working with really, really large audiences and that you can scale very quickly, then you can sometimes go out and go all out like this and put really high budgets on there. And then the main reason for using manual bid is for scaling really big winners. And what you want to do there is you're basically using manual bid to protect these super high budgets from potential large losses, because their whole budget will be spent on auto bid, but with manual bid you have a control there and you can control that. Well, I don't test something that I don't know at all with manual bid. I typically test things with auto bid and moderate budgets. And I wouldn't recommend that you start testing with manual bid. So let's talk about scaling with lookalikes. We haven't really talked much about lookalikes, and let's revisit how lookalikes are actually built and defined. So lookalikes are always an exact match of the base audiences. And what that means is they match the base audience in a lot of different criteria. And in order to kind of put a little bit of a hierarchy on there to show you how important that is, I kind of like to think of it like this. The demographics of the LLAs, of the lookalike audience, is always an exact match of the demographics in the base audience. And you can prove that to yourself by taking any lookalike audience into Power Editor, and you load it. So you just open up a test campaign and go to the ad set, and you put a lookalike audience as an audience into the ad set in Power Editor, and then you want to go ahead and manipulate the demographic settings. So you can manipulate the gender, right? The gender is by default set to all, and the age range is by default set to 18 to 65 plus. So you start manipulating the gender. When you change the gender from all to male, you're going to watch the amount of people, the count of people who are in this lookalike audience, and it will go down, right? You can see on the right side, we should go over that maybe in the Q&A, we can do that real quick and show that. But you'll see on the right side how many people are left in the audience after you limit the lookalike audience to only the male. And then switch it over to only the females. And there you see exactly the balance. And there's usually, I mean, not usually, it depends on your base audience. If you upload an email list that has 80% males in there and 20% males, you will find that your lookalike audience is an exact reflection of that. Okay, you'll have the 80% males in the lookalike audience and 20% males in the lookalike, females in the lookalike audience as well. Okay. The next thing, and so the same thing is true for the age range. So you can actually go through your demographics and scan your lookalike audience with your age ranges. So if you have this default sitting from 18 to 65, now you use the controls to narrow this down and just maybe look at what happens if I just look at 18 to 30-year-old males. And you'll see, oh, wow, so this is still very big. You know, let's say out of your 2 million audience on a 1% lookalike, you have now still 1.5 million left. That means that the base audience had a big bubble in really young males, and then it kind of tailed off. And the lookalike always reflects that exactly. The other thing that matches is the buying behavior. So if you have people who are in this kind of segment, in this layer of audience that Facebook has identified as being frequent buyers, then your lookalike audience will reflect that as well. They will also have an abundance of overage on frequent buyers in it. And then thirdly, and in my opinion, less importantly than anything else, there is supposedly also an affinity and interest. I don't really care that much about that, because I think that demographics and buying behavior are by far the most important criteria for this. So, but you can do the same thing with interest. You can, walk different interests through your lookalike audiences, and you'll see. But for example, so let's talk about what effect that has, right? On how you can use the lookalike audiences. The lookalike audiences can be used for scaling. If you build a lookalike audience based on a custom audience of buyers, you'll be able to use that as a new audience in a brand new campaign. Now you have different people that Facebook says they're going to be likely to convert well. Okay, and that's a good way to scale your campaigns with lookalike audiences. Let me talk about the other criteria of lookalike audiences. So the sizes that are available to lookalike audiences reach from 1% to 10% in Facebook, in the Facebook tools. If you have extra tools like Trackify or Smartly or something like that that uses Facebook API, you can even build up to 20% lookalike audiences. So what does the percentage mean? The percentage is a very clear definition. It means give me the 1%, the X% of the people who live in this country or who are on Facebook in this country who are the 1% of that country's audience that is most similar to the base audience that I give you. And that similarity is, again, defined in these layers here: demographics, buying behaviors, interests, and other things, right? So that's how this works. This is how this is defined, okay? So this is also how you can understand that, for example, the lookalike audience of 1% in UK is a lot smaller than the lookalike audience 1% in the US, right? Big difference, because the population size is different, and the lookalike audience always gives you the 1% that are most similar to this. So also observe, you can also observe that lookalike audience sizes never change. You know, lookalike audience 1% in the US is always around 2 million people. Yeah. They would change if all of a sudden the population of the United States would double. Then you would all of a sudden have 4 million in a lookalike audience 1%. But that's simply because of the definition. It's 1%, the 1% of the country's audience that is on Facebook that are most similar to the actual audience, to the base audience. Okay, so now these are a little bit of a quality concern about lookalikes. So obviously, the larger they get, the less similar they get compared to the base audience. And on the other hand, as you're working through the buying behaviors here, it also gets less and less similar to what actually your buyer profile is, right? So if you consider your buyers list or your purchase event buyers as your buyers, those are a close match. And if you have a close match to this group, then that's a more likely audience that's going to buy. If you go looking for add to cart people, again, Facebook is going to obviously include that, right? So normally the add to cart base audience is an audience that includes all the buyers, right? Because everyone who buys must have had the thing in the cart, and so at some point they must have triggered an add to cart for that product. So as you move from purchase to add to cart to view content to video views, those base audiences become, in theory, less and less high quality if you're looking for a purchase conversion. But again, this is an awesome way to scale, because even if you start out with, let's say you're building a lookalike audience for the purchase events, you start out with that and it works well. Now you have a campaign that works well. Now you ask yourself, well, how am I going to scale this? Well, one way is to just step over to the add to cart audience and duplicate everything there, set up the whole CASA 6.2 thing, and just switch out the purchase audiences into and change it into an add to cart lookalike audience. Okay, and so that's one way. Another way of widening the audience, widening out, stretching out the audience, stretching out the reach, so that you don't keep hammering the same audiences with the ads. And then you can move to the view content and to the video view. You can also sort of move from the 1% to the 10%. And here my recommendation is that you shouldn't confine yourself to just the 1%. A lot of times the 3% audience, where maybe the 1% is even excluded from that audience, is going to be better or working better, performs better than a 1%. And there's not really a totally rational explanation to that, but that's just sometimes the case. Countries and regions. Okay, so you can build audiences, lookalike audiences specific to countries. You can also combine different countries in the same lookalike audience. And you can also choose something that's called regions. So regions are like combinations of countries in a certain area. So, for example, EEA, the European Economic, what stands the A for? Association, maybe, is the group of European countries that are together in the European Union. And so with that, you can also build like really large lookalike audiences and expand your reach into different areas in the world like that. In general, you need to have at least 100 people inside a base audience in order to be able to build a lookalike audience. And there's another condition to this. These 100 people actually have to be in the same country. The 100 people in the base audience, you can, so at least 100 people have to be in one country inside the base audience. And if that's the case, once that's true, you can actually build lookalike audiences in that country for that country out of this base audience, but also for other countries. So if you have a lookalike audience of 200, 300 people, I'm sorry, a custom audience of 200, 300 people in the US, you can build a lookalike audience from that for Australia and start expanding to Australia right away with people who are similar to your buyers, but your buyers in the US, but those similar people are going to be in Australia. And that's a pretty good thing. That's an awesome way to also keep scaling that. You should manage LAAs, lookalike audiences, a little bit for overlap, and that's true at least specifically when you raise budgets, when you go with higher budgets, right? So the more budgets you let into a specific audience, the more you have to be somewhat concerned about overlap and not to compete between the ad sets that you're launching. Okay, audience exclusion, that's a related subject to this. So managing audiences, you can do that by excluding an audience from the audiences that you're including in your ad sets. So once you're building your audience in your ad set, in Power Editor, when you're setting up the CASA 6.2 campaigns, you want to go ahead and exclude certain audiences. What I always do is, well, number one, I don't exclude if you don't retarget, but we are going to retarget. So don't take this to verbatim here, but then exclude the following, exclude the view content audience. What that does is it makes sure that the ads are reaching further and deeper into the audiences. So anyone who has already viewed the content, viewed your product on your store, is not going to see the original cold lead ads, cold traffic ads again. Okay, that's a good thing to do because it continues to deepen the reach. So this is a measure that avoids that people see, ads that you can't control, because here they see a cold ad and therefore they now can't see a retargeting ad because, Facebook kind of limits that, how many times you can see the same ad and stuff like that. So that helps out with that. Definitely exclude add to cart and purchases, right? So the buyers don't need to see your original ad again.
That's on the lookalikes. Is that on the lookalikes, or is that just in general?
This is in general. This also goes for interest audiences as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So anytime you're starting to scale, essentially you're asking yourself, how can I reach more people? And one way that helps with that is by trying to not reach people who you've already reached.
Right, because you can retarget them, right? Yeah. You're going to be retargeting to the content.
Exactly. But so for that to really work out well, we go back to don't exclude if you don't retarget. You want to have ads going to those people particularly, right, because these are your warm audiences. Mm-hmm. You don't want to just block them off and never get in touch with them, mm-hmm, but you want to make sure that they can be reached by the ads that are specific to them, which are the retargeting ads.
Okay.
You know, with the retargeting ads, you're showing them the products that they've already watched, that they've already seen, that they've already put into the cart. Whereas with just cold audiences, if they stay in the cold ad set audiences, you're going to just randomly reach them again with maybe the same product that they haven't been interested in already, maybe, you know, something else.
Okay, I see. All right. Solutions.
Yeah, it's good. So let's skip the workflows section. I don't, well, actually, we need to go through that real quick. So test multiple ad sets. That means, you know, essentially I give you one way to test multiple ad sets. It's the CASA 6.2 because there are 6 ad sets in that one, right? Just do it that way. Just, you know, don't get confused with other possible combinations. Just go with that workflow until you master it. And then you can ask yourself, well, is there something else that's even better than that? But this is what I would suggest you do right now. So I test multiple ad sets like we do in the CASA 6.2 for contrast. The contrast is like what allows us to see, right? Anything. Even like with our eyesight, if it wasn't for the contrast of light and dark, shadows and light, we wouldn't be able to see anything. If it's always dark, we just can't distinguish anything. If it's always bright, we can't distinguish anything. So contrast is what gives us visibility and vision, okay? And the multiple ad sets also open your mind to the random factor, which is important. So the random factor, the idea of the random factor is Facebook can't 100% control who's going to see the ads first. So there's a random element. The random element is controlled by factors like who happens to be online at this point. Who else is competing for that same person that also happens to be in your audience? You know, how are they going to, are they on their mobile phone or are they on something else? So there are tons of factors that are completely out of your control in setting the audience and setting all the criteria that you're setting, but it's essentially actually also out of Facebook's control entirely. And so that's why we call this the random factor, because not even Facebook really controls that part. And the random factor, so the random way that the initial people in any ad set that you launch see that ad set is responsible for different results on each ad set, even if the ad set audience and setup and everything else is exactly identical. Okay, so it's the random factor, and it's emphasized by the fact that we're looking at very small numbers. So the random factor combined with statistically irrelevant sizes is what makes for different performances between multiple ad sets that you're launching to the same exact audience. Now, because of that, this teaches you something, and what it should teach you is that when you think you're split testing interests in different ad sets, think again. Because if the thing already responds differently when you launch the ad sets to the same audiences, then how do you know that's because of the interest that they're responding differently when you happen to launch ad sets to different interests? In my opinion, it's far more likely that the difference is caused by the random factor because your sample size is too small. And we want to try to make this work with small budgets initially, so we can be conservative with our budget and find some indications of what might work well also with larger budgets. So we're trying to really make this system that is built for large numbers work with small numbers. And with that in mind, it's not going to work in discerning things like interests, split testing interests. You know, it might work if you launch enough of them. But so that's why I try to make you also always duplicate, create multiple duplicates of the same interest. So even if you split test between different interests or different audiences, also always include duplicates of both of them, because then you can convince yourself that, oh yes, okay, so all three of this interest actually worked well at this time, and all three of the other interests didn't work well. Well, okay, that's a start, right? There you have kind of like a split test going that is a little bit more possibly meaningful. because now you start developing a little bit bigger numbers, right? So run multiple ads per ad sets. That's kind of for a different reason, because there you're tapping into an untapped optimization skill or optimization function of Facebook, right? If you don't use that, you're basically missing out on Facebook helping you out in finding which of two things you might want to test is going to be the winner. Okay, so if you run multiple ads per ad sets all the time, you kind of get a better feel for how this split testing can work out for you. So test different creatives, test different products, and now we're going to look at this PDF that was in your group there in the MEMS area. So this is kind of like a questionnaire. It's a little bit of a different way to skin the same cat. So it starts with the question, ask yourself, what is your objective? If you want to validate your engagement, validate that you have engagement, make sure that you get social proof on your ad campaigns, and you can, build audiences, then your solution would be a PPE ad or possibly a video view ad, because these are good for engagement testing, and they work with lower budgets because you get a lot of page post engagements all the time. So even for $5 at 5 cents a pop, you're going to get 100 engagements, and so that's good. That's a larger number than you're likely to get purchases for $5. And the criteria in this one, so the criteria for PPE, when my objective here is validating engagement and building social proof, is that the CPC all metric should be below 10 cents. That says $0.1, right? So below 10 cents.
Oh wow, below 10.
It's under 10 cents. Yeah, that's CPC all. That's not CPC link click.
Okay.
Better yet, if the CPC all is below 5 cents. That's really strong engagement. It can happen, and on good creatives, it will happen that way. So same question here. As you see, it's the same question. I want to validate engagement, build some social proof, and build audiences. Then you can also use a video view optimized campaign. Obviously, you use it with a video creative. Okay, so low to medium budgets is okay with this one, right? And now the metric you want to watch with this one is the video view of 10 seconds should be below 2 cents. Ideally, it should actually be below 1 cent, but usually if it's below 2 cents, you're really good, you're golden. Okay, at least as far as engagement is concerned, and as far as it is concerned to the cost of building these audiences, because that's what you can do here with the video view audiences, is you build up all these different video view audiences, and they, of course, have then a cost attached to it that's more affordable, and then you do something else with them and leverage them. So you want to create all of these, like I said before, then you compare them with each other. So if you have a short video, like a minute or minute and a half, then you will see that you will actually get quite a few 95% viewers, many more than if you had a half-hour video, right? With a half-hour video, 95%, that's like, oh, that's, 30, almost 27 minutes. So that would take quite a long time to watch that much, and so you would get fewer visitors that watch that much. And so with a short video, which is what you should be using for these types of ads, a minute and a half, you will get quite a few, but you get more 75%, you get even more 50%, and so forth. So then what you want to do, you want to just set them aside from each other, next to each other, and compare them in size. And you'll often find that, oh, I have 3,000 10-second views, and you go, oh, I have 2,000 25% views. And then it'll, go down like that. Often you have, as soon as you can see, oh, I have 100 views here left over, maybe you have 70 views of 95% viewers, then that means you can't use that audience yet for anything meaningful. So you're looking for the audience here that is giving you at least 300 to 1,000 of these. These are good to use for lookalike audiences. Now, if the question is you want to build up your pixel and you want to build audiences, then you want to go to this solution, which is website conversion optimized. you go for purchase or add to cart optimized, and you should use this with medium to higher budgets. So that's why I suggest for the CASA 6.2 system, I suggest that you go with at least $20 budgets there. Well, I said earlier I would go with 10, right? So yeah. Okay, so
Just depends. Yeah, depends on their budget.
now here, of course, you want to look for CPA and add to cart to purchase, and the ROAS. In a good world, it's usually between 2 to 3 or higher. Of course, the higher the better. So the ROAS is how many times it's a factor, how many times the ad spend is coming back in form of reported revenue. I will go over that in detail in the next segment, which is optimizing campaigns. Now, if your question is you want to build pixels, if it's brand new, you can optimize for, you can pick the website conversion optimized campaign or optimize for view content. You could also optimize for link clicks, and the metric you want to look for is your cost per action for the view content, and also very important for the ratio between link clicks and view content events. And you want that to be larger than 1. That just means that, no, actually smaller than 1. Sorry, smaller than 1. That just means that you're going to have more view content events than link clicks. Okay, you want to have more view contents than link clicks, because why again? That's when people engage in your store and they're walking around putting looking at multiple products. Each of the products triggers another view content event. And so that's how one link click can lead to multiple view content events. So if you have more view content events than link clicks, then that ratio is going to be less than 1, and that's happy times.
That's makes sense.
Okay. So these are some of the examples here. Again, I don't want to go through them in more detail now not to confuse you, and just kind of steer you towards the CASA 6.2 method of testing, and leave that to you to do now. So your turn to scale now. Again, this is the second half of this campaign, so of this webinar. Let me see. Yeah, so this is good. It's the right slide here. So create a PPE, create 2 more campaigns of the CASA 6.2 method. Use different product on one of them. Use 2 different products on one of them, and use different audiences on the other one. Okay, that's your assignment for the next break. And we should do a short break now. And you can take action, but your action will be to come back in 15 minutes.